Welcome to True Life Lessons, where we explore stories that touch the heart and illuminate the darkest corners of human existence. On a dark and tempestuous night, a young traveler named Daniel found himself stranded in the middle of a desolate forest. Disaster struck suddenly when the carriage wheel shattered against a hidden rock, leaving the vehicle completely useless in the deep mud. Daniel stepped out into the freezing downpour, his expensive coat offering little protection against the biting wind and the relentless rain. The forest seemed to close in on him, with shadows dancing menacingly and the thunder roaring like a hungry, angry beast. He knew he could not stay in the open, so he dragged his tired feet forward, hoping to find a refuge. Just as hope began to fade entirely, a tiny flicker of light appeared in the distance, cutting through the dark gloom. It was a beacon of survival, and Daniel summoned his last reserves of strength to push toward that solitary, warm glow. As he got closer, the light revealed a humble, dilapidated hut that looked like it might collapse under the strong wind. Desperate for warmth, Daniel pounded on the rough wooden door, praying that someone inside would hear his plea above the storm. The door creaked open slowly to reveal an old villager, his face lined with deep wrinkles, but his eyes shining kind. Daniel explained his plight, his voice trembling from the cold, asking if he could just stand inside until the storm passed. Without a moment of hesitation, the old man opened the door wide and welcomed the stranger into his humble little home. The inside was smaller than Daniel expected, just a single room with a leaking roof, but it felt incredibly warm and safe. The old villager immediately handed him a dry cloth and insisted he sit by the small fire to warm his freezing body. Seeing the young man shivering, the host went to his small stove and poured a bowl of hot, steaming vegetable soup. He placed the bowl in front of Daniel with a gentle smile, urging him to eat and regain his lost strength. Daniel was starving, and the simple soup tasted like the most delicious meal he had ever experienced in his entire life. As he ate, Daniel noticed that the old man had no bowl for himself, sitting quietly with just a cup of water. Curious and concerned, Daniel asked why he wasn't eating, wondering if the old man had already finished his own dinner earlier. The old man simply smiled and said that seeing his guest warm and fed was enough nourishment for his old soul. Daniel glanced at the pot and realized with a shock that he had just consumed the very last bit of food. Guilt washed over him as he understood that this poor man had given up his only meal to save a stranger. The villager saw his concern and spoke softly, saying that true wealth lies in what we are willing to share. They sat by the fire as the storm raged outside, sharing stories and warmth in that tiny, humble sanctuary of kindness. When it was time to sleep, the old man insisted Daniel take the only bed while he slept on the floor. Daniel lay awake for a long time, deeply moved by the generosity of someone who possessed so little yet gave so much. The next morning, the storm had passed, and the golden sun rose to illuminate the forest with a fresh, new light. Daniel prepared to leave, shaking the old man's hand firmly and promising that he would never forget this act of kindness. The old villager waved goodbye, his smile as bright as the morning sun, asking for nothing in return for his hospitality. As he walked away, Daniel turned back one last time to memorize the image of the small hut that saved him. Years went by, and Daniel worked tirelessly, using the lesson of that night to guide his path toward great success. He became a wealthy and respected merchant, but the memory of the old man and the soup never faded from his mind. One day, he decided it was finally time to return, to find his savior and repay the debt of kindness properly. The carriage rolled through the forest path, which was now familiar yet different under the bright and welcoming afternoon sun. When he arrived at the spot, His heart sank as he saw the hut was now dilapidated and seemingly abandoned by time. He rushed out of his carriage, fearing the worst, and called out to see if anyone was still living in the ruins. A young woman stepped out from the shadows, looking surprised to see a wealthy man standing in her humble, overgrown yard. Daniel eagerly described the old man who had lived there, asking if she knew where he was or what had happened. The young woman's expression turned sorrowful as she quietly informed him that her father had passed away 2 winters ago. Daniel felt a heavy weight in his chest, realizing he was too late to thank the man who had saved his life. She told him that her father died poor, but he always spoke of a stormy night when he helped a young traveler. He used to tell her that it was one of the happiest nights of his life because he could be useful. Daniel was moved to tears, realizing that the old man had cherished their brief encounter just as much as he had. He looked at the crumbling structure and decided right then that he would honor the old man's memory in a permanent way. He told the daughter that he wanted to rebuild the hut not for himself, but as a sanctuary for all travelers. Work began immediately, with Daniel funding the entire project to transform the ruins into a safe haven for those in need. Soon, a sturdy and welcoming shelter stood in place of the old hut, ready to withstand the fiercest of storms. Inside, the pantry was always stocked with food, and clean blankets were prepared for anyone who might lose their way. At the entrance, they hung a large lantern that would remain lit every single night, a beacon of hope in the darkness. This light was a tribute to the old man's spirit, ensuring that no traveler would ever have to face the dark alone. Years later, many weary travelers found their way to safety, guided by the unwavering light of the shelter Daniel had built. The daughter managed the shelter, continuing her father's legacy of kindness and ensuring that his generous spirit would live on forever. Daniel often visited, watching strangers find comfort, knowing that the old man's single bowl of soup had fed thousands of souls. It was a powerful reminder that even the smallest act of charity can grow into a magnificent legacy that changes the world. The storm may rage outside, but as long as there are people willing to share, the light of humanity will never fade. We should always remember to pay it forward, for the kindness we give today will echo in eternity long after we are gone. Daniel passed this story down to his children and grandchildren, teaching them that true success is measured by how much we give. Like a single candle lighting 1,000 others, one good deed can spark a movement that illuminates the entire world with love. The old villager never knew he was a hero, but his simple choice to open his door created a ripple of hope. Daniel stood before the old man's grave, whispering a thank you that the wind carried through the trees of the silent forest. The trees rustled gently in response, as if the spirit of the old man was acknowledging that his kindness had truly borne fruit. Inside the shelter, laughter and stories filled the air, replacing the silence of the forest with the vibrant sounds of human connection. Inspired by the story, many travelers began to leave donations, ensuring the shelter would remain self-sufficient for generations to come. The shelter grew, not just in size but in spirit, becoming a community landmark where the values of compassion were practiced daily. Children played in the garden where weeds once grew, proving that life and joy can flourish even in the most unlikely places. Daniel realized that this was his greatest achievement, far surpassing any business deal or wealth he had accumulated in his career. Never underestimate the power of a small act, for you never know when your kindness might save a life or inspire another. Be the light in someone else's storm, and you will find that your own path becomes brighter and clearer in the process. Life is not measured by what we keep for ourselves, but by what we share with others when they need it most. As the sun sets on our story, let the message of the old villager stay with you and guide your daily actions. Look around you today and see if there is a small way you can bring warmth to someone who is feeling cold. Together we can build a world where no one is left out in the storm and every traveler has a place to rest. Let your heart be that open door and your kindness be the soup that nourishes the weary souls you meet along the way. Thank you for watching True Life Lessons. Subscribe for more stories that inspire the soul and bring light to the world.